I think this is going to be a really fun episode. Buzzwords and where they kind of originated from, why every generation seems to have different buzz terms. So if we do give really outdated buzz terms, sorry, we're kind of old, so don't judge us too much.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I might not know some.
Yeah, we'll test you based off the limited amount that I know as well.
I mean, some of the really highly charged buzz terms, that we use right now are, woke or gaslighting, gender apartheid or DEI. So these are just some that are really, right now very charged in our everyday life. And then there are more specific terms that I think that are depending on specific groups. And so we have, buzz terms and slang that is really powerful. And
well, let's just go to what you mentioned before, like gaslight. Like, where does that kind of come from? Why is it so widely used?
It's very interesting. I mean, it's actually there's a politicized discussion now about the use of lighting as a term. I think it's basically, about saying something that is inflammatory. On the stove, if you light the gas, the whole burner will go on, or it might go back, to origin of gas lamps.
Yeah, I saw one a while ago. It's like the gas lamp is like, did you turn it off? You didn't.
Yes.
Did you turn it off? Like I swear I did, but I didn't.
It became so powerful because it is about relational dynamics. Psychologically, I think it's really interesting because it is about getting another person to react to something that they will have a strong emotional reactions. You light them up with an emotional reaction, then you pretend that what you have said before is completely innocuous and that they actually have a crazy reaction.
Oh, so it's like these words, these buzz terms could mean nothing, and they can have that effect because they have some association with the other party.
So it's basically, I say something that, gets you very upset, and you will have an emotional reaction, and now you start to get louder, and you start, and then I'm like, you're acting totally crazy. I didn't mean anything by that. You're out of control, and you should be in therapy, and
So inversely, this is like the positive spectrum of it. It's like this word can rile you up positively and more positively as you use it, and that becomes...
Yes, so when we then say, well, you are gaslighting me, then I can bring, attention to that process of that you pretend that you have no ill intention,
right,
and that you had no judgment. And I think that's where it becomes very charged, because it is also a power move, right? So someone will try to have more power over you by getting you emotional and lose your composure and lose your ability to rationally explain what is going on. It's used in a lot of political debates, and that you try to trigger the other person into saying things that will make them appear, irrational.
Right. So do you think these words, I know some of them have like political meaning, like people see them in a political context and then they think, oh, that would be a cool word to use, and then they repeat it to their peers. Social media kind of repeats it, and then they become these big, strong buzzwords that everyone knows.
Yes, and understanding more about relational dynamics, we all took so quickly to that term and thought it was really helpful to talk about power dynamics, right? But then it became very much taken on by a group, maybe of those who felt more disenfranchised or who wanted to point out more the power dynamics. And those who are in power may not like this, and then it becomes a struggle around that term. And it becomes signified with people who advocate maybe for a specific group.
Okay. I see.
So that's very similar with the term woke, right? I mean, it came out very much out of African American slang, and became particularly a term that was used for Black Lives Matter, that it is about an awareness of what is going on, awareness of disparities, an awareness of white privilege. It became a very politicized term that was used, more by progressive groups who wanted to address issues around racism, inequality, understanding diversity.
Okay. That's crazy because it started off as understanding diversity, but now like woke could be used in contexts that have nothing to do with diversity.
Right. And that's the interesting part, I think, about language and the psychology. So that, I mean, there are linguists who can obviously talk much more eloquently about this,
Right.
about how terms change. So we have at times terms that completely change in meaning as a result of societal changes and climate, So woke is one of these terms that it originally was internally used as a compliment, where, inside the group, where people could say, this person is really woke, they are very aware, they are very reflective, they are knowledgeable
Yes.
about diversity. And it's not something that people say about themselves. I mean, if you say, I'm woke,
It's like
that's
counterproductive.
yeah,
for your
that's,
case.
complimenting yourself.
And I think woke now evolved to like not even have anything to do with race. It's
Yes.
just like if someone has a deep understanding, minus like anything else, just a deep understanding in general,
Right.
people say that they're woke.
Yeah, and then, you have possibly another group who can claim this term and use it now. And that's what happened as an insult. And says woke for them doesn't mean that you are progressive and understanding and aware. It means that you are hypersensitive, irrational, advocating for the wrong causes. That's what we see right now, that, the far right is using the term woke as an insult to basically mark you as a snowflake and, someone who is cannot be taken seriously.
Wow, I had no clue about that.
Yes. So it has become this extremely polarized term that changes its meaning based on who the speaker is.
I'm sure 90% of these people on social media who are using it have no idea like the political background between the term.
Yeah, so it has become a real buzz term on the right to discredit people. And this is one of the unfortunate tendencies or developments that we have, that now we see this split that goes through all communities, even through families, between people who cannot anymore talk to each other because you have these very polarizing languages and terms that you use. Words have very different meanings.
Right. I think even like going back to gaslighting, it's like in the past you mentioned it was a government term, like within the government, but now, yeah, it has nothing to do with the government. People throw it around to, and I'm pretty sure most of the people that throw it around just didn't even know it was used in a government sense.
Yes, I think that's something that is in so many ways fascinating, at times really interesting and fun about language, how terminology changes.
Right.
Words and the meaning and what we associate and what we feel when we use the terms changes. I mean, some things are really, when we look at how young people and older people use it, I mean, years ago we talked a lot about hooking up, and hooking up meant for people, who were born in the 50s or 40s, just connecting with somebody, meeting someone.
That's definitely not what it means now.
It had nothing to do with engaging in casual sex, And so it has changed. The term has totally changed.
Okay, in the previous two examples, it seems like the explosion of this term was, these terms like woke and gaslight has to do with like controversy surrounding big topics, which is why the word started being used by more and more people.
Right.
But in the terms of what you just said, like hooking up, these have nothing to do with big controversies or like large events happening. So how do you think that term became so popular?
I think there are a lot of societal changes that took place, right? I mean, the possibility to have premarital sex, the understanding that, you can have sex without a lot of consequences because there's birth control, there's protection, and a change maybe how we think about relationship, that you're not a bad person if you engage in sexual activities, So there's already a societal change that happens, and then there became the question, how do we even talk about this, about casual sexual relationships,
Right.
So friends with benefits or, hooking up. You didn't have to do a long time of courting and the promise of marriage
Right.
in order to become sexually active. So as society changed, the language also has to catch up with it.
I see. So in the attempt to make intercourse more casual, they try to find a more casual term that ended up being hooking up,
Yeah.
because in the past, hooking up was a casual meet and greet, or
Yes.
meet up with your friends.
Yes, it was meeting up with friends, and
Okay.
and then you usually have some subgroup, who begin to engage maybe in casual sex, and they have tried to find a good term for it, so they probably came up with, hooking up. As certain phenomena happen more, you try to give, words to it so that you can communicate with other people easily about it,
Right.
and capture maybe a newer phenomenon.
Right. I feel like it also does change public opinion on things, because now, like, hooking up is something that is seemingly normal. It's like they successfully coined the casual term and associate it with intercourse now, which in the past was strictly prohibited,
yes,
or like
and
frowned upon.
It's not that it didn't happen,
Right.
but it was such a taboo that you didn't even really.
You can't really talk about it.
I think so. In so many ways, language mirrors, our life and phenomena in our life, and as we have words for it, it also changes how we think about it and how we feel about it. So that's, I think, is where it's so interesting. And if for psychology, it's really important to understand these changes in language so that you can actually also relate to the experience. Let's say, you have, as a older therapist, you have a, college student who's like, let's say 20, and they talk about this. It's important that you not use this sterile language, so you actually engaged in casual sexual intercourse. I mean, that would feel so horrible, I mean, it would cringe, that's another term. It would be really cringy, but it might be a real relief if the therapist understands or can use the term, oh, so you hooked up with this person.
I see. So it also helps in that sense, so it's to become more relatable.
Yes, it is to relate to it allows us to relate to the experience.
Okay.
To understand how people self-identify, to be able to understand, when it comes to all different racial identities, or sexual identities or gender identities, to understand the language and to be able to make those changes so that you can relate.
So continuing about identities, I think it's pretty crazy how every generation kind of have their own slang terms or buzzwords. We were using our buzzwords, and then Gen Z came in and they have their buzzwords, and they're completely different and completely new. And all of a sudden, like, ours are considered old. Before, I thought saying like that's bomb or that's whatever was pretty cringy in my time, but now it's like the words that we say are cringy to the people who are younger than us.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about like the generational buzzwords and how every generation does not fail to come up with their own, especially like Gen Alpha creating so many different buzzwords?
It has a lot to do with identity, and language is in so many ways also a reflection of identity. And I mean, when we speak with an accent or when we speak a dialect, it gives you a sense of being at home somewhere. You can convey something about yourself through language, and sometimes it's used to also really distinguish yourself, from others by using your language. I think that's particularly important for, adolescent, teenage culture, that it is about wanting to define your own identity and having fun with that. So you create your own language in some way as a subgroup. Subgroups in society usually develop their own terminology to account for their own experiences. It gives you a sense also of belonging. I belong to this really hip culture, or I belong to really youthful in people because I have the language down. And I think there are experiences connected to it, getting it and distinguishing yourself from those who are older by having your own style, your own fashion, your own language, your own music. And it reflects changes that every new generation has to deal with new phenomena, so they also need a language that reflects that.
Yeah, I think earlier you said it takes a relationship to make these words have meaning, and the more relationships, the more meaning this word has. But also now you're saying also exclusivity also plays a big role as well. You need enough people to know about it, but also enough people to not know about it for it to be for it to be cool.
Yeah, for it to be cool and hip and different. Yes, it can be a process that is both in some way inclusive and giving you a sense of belonging, but also exclusive and saying we are different.
I think the biggest example of exclusivity is probably have you heard of 6'7"?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything, and I was like, and so I had to start researching it. I'm like, why do they say 6'7"?
So I think that's the finest term of exclusivity. Gaslight has meaning, woke has meaning, but 6'7" it's just a coined term that through social media has developed so many relationships, but also separates them exclusively from anyone that isn't on these channels.
Yeah, and there's no clear, meaningful origin to the word. There's just basically meaning. Doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's like our old 42, the meaning of life, but now it's different numbers.
Wow, yeah, that's a good example. Again, it can be divisive in some way and exclusive. At times it's challenging for people to get an understanding and to get a way in. But I think it helps us, to learn a little bit the language of other people. In some way, it's very interesting for psychology, and especially when we talk about psychodynamic therapy, because it's talk therapy, and so a sensitivity for language and developing a really meaningful relationship, you basically have to develop your own language every time with a new patient. And you learn
that's really cool.
You learn that they have specific terms that are very meaningful, and you, like in every relationship, when you see couples who have been together for a long time, they have their terms and their buzz terms, and when you're an outsider, you don't understand what they are at times talking about and what it means, because they have developed their own language.
So it just depends on how large or small the scale is, but it just all fully revolves around the relationship at the end of the day.
I mean, therapy in itself has its own language, but it is about, with each patient to find a way to develop a language together, to come to an understanding.
Wow, I love how you brought it back to how it does tie in with patients and therapists. That's it for our Buzzwords episode.
That's
I'm
a wrap.
We're here with
Dr. Jens Schmidt.
Yeah, so Dr. Jens is director of the PsyD program at SCU. So if anyone is interested, go check it out. And then, we'll see you on the next episode.